Late at night, a young woman named Claire heard a soft scratching at her door. She opened it to find a small black cat and with glowing eyes staring up at her. Feeling sorry for the poor creature, she let it in, offering food and warmth. The cat curled up on her lap, purring contentedly. But as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. The lights flickered, shadows danced along the walls, and the temperature dropped. Claire's breath came out in visible puffs. The cat's purring grew louder, almost like a chant. It stared at her with those piercing eyes, unblinking. Suddenly, Claire felt a sharp pain on her arm. She looked down to see a deep scratch, fresh and bleeding. She jumped up, but the cat remained still, watching her. The air around it seemed to shimmer, and the creature began to change. Its fur thinned, its body stretched unnaturally until it was no longer a cat at all, but a hunched, grotesque figure with sunken eyes and a crooked grin. "You invited me in," it whispered, and the voice that crawled up under her skin. "And now you can never leave." The door slammed shut, trapping Claire in the room, her scream swallowed by the sound. One evening, a boy named Tommy found a stray dog wandering near his house. The dog was large, with matted fur and eyes that seemed too human. Feeling sorry for it, Tommy took the dog in, gave it food, and let it sleep at the foot of his bed. That night, Tommy was awakened by the sounds of soft panting. He sat up, groggy, and saw the dog sitting at the foot of his bed, staring at him. Its eyes glistened in the dark. Tommy felt uneasy, but told himself it was just a dog. The next morning, he told his parents about the dog, but the parents looked confused. "What dog?" they asked. When Tommy led them to his room, the dog was gone. He searched everywhere, but there was no sign of it. That night, as Tommy laid in his bed, the dog returned, silently slipping into his room. But something was different. The dog's legs were longer, its face sharper, and his eyes still too human. Tommy tried to call out for his parents, but his voice was caught in his throat. The dog climbed onto the bed, closer, until its cold breath was on his face. "Don't scream," the dog whispered in a voice that was not a dog at all. Tommy froze, too terrified to move. Then suddenly the creature crawled under his bed, disappearing into the shadows. From that night on, Tommy never dared to sleep with his feet uncovered, for fear of the thing that still waited beneath his bed. Lily adored her doll, Clara. She carried it everywhere, the park, school, and even to bed. Clara had porcelain skin, glassy blue eyes, and a soft smile. But over time, Lily's parents noticed something odd. No matter where Lily left the doll, they would often find it in a different position, as if it had been moved. One night, while Lily was fast asleep, her mother heard faint giggling coming from her room. She quietly crept to the door and peeked inside. Lily was sound asleep, but Clara, the doll, was smiling upright, facing the door, with her eyes slightly opened, almost watching her. Unsettled, her mother walked over and turned the doll's head away. placing it back on the shelf. But just as she turned to leave, the giggling started again, now louder. She whipped around only to see Clara's head slowly turning back toward her, eyes widened and smiling. The next day, Lily's mother tried to get rid of the doll, placing it in the attic. But that night, as Lily slept, her mother heard footsteps creeping through the hall. She rushed into Lily's room and gasped. Clara was lying next to Lily, but this time her porcelain face had tiny cracks, and her once innocent smile now stretched too wide, her glassy eyes almost glowing. Then in the silence the doll whispered, "Don't take me again, or she'll have to come with me." Late one night, a mother and father were awoken by the sound of soft crying coming from the baby monitor. Their newborn daughter, Emma, was in her crib upstairs. The father got up first, groggily saying, "I'll check on her," while his wife stayed in bed, too tired to move. As he walked toward the nursery, the crying grew louder, more frantic. He quickened his pace, but when he reached Emma's room, he froze in the doorway. The crib was empty. Panicked, he rushed downstairs to find his wife already standing in the hallway, staring at something in her hand, Emma's favorite blanket. I, I, I thought you went to check on her, she said, her voice trembling. "I did. She's not there," the father replied, his voice breaking. Just then they both heard her crying again, louder now, but not from the monitor. It was coming from the basement. The mother's eyes widened. "We don't go down there," she whispered. Years ago, they had boarded up the basement after strange noises and cold drafts haunted their home. But now they had no choice. Together they descended the creaky stairs, the crying growing louder with each step. When they reached the bottom, they stood frozen in horror. Emma was there, cradled in the arms of a pale, gaunt woman in tattered clothes, her long, bony fingers stroking the baby's head, and her hollow eyes gleamed in the dim light. "She's mine now," the woman hissed. "You never should have let me in." Before either could move, the basement door slammed shut behind them, sealing the darkness around them. They would never see Emma or daylight again. Late one stormy night, Jake was walking home a long, lonely highway when a car pulled up beside him. It was an old black sedan, its windows tinted so dark they couldn't see the driver. The passenger side window rolled down with a soft hum, and a cold voice from within said, "Need a ride?" Jake hesitated, but soaked and miles from home, he climbed in. The leather seats were cold and stiff, and the air inside smelled like damp earth. As the car began moving, Jake noticed the dashboard had no lights, no radio, not even a speedometer. It was eerily quiet, just the sound of the tires rolling over the wet asphalt. "Where are you headed?" Jake asked, his voice uneasy. The driver didn't answer. Instead, the rearview mirror tilted slightly, and for a brief moment, Jake caught a glimpse of the driver's face. A face without eyes, nose, or mouth, just smooth, pale skin stretched over a skull-like shape. Panicking, Jake reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The locks clicked down on their own, and the car sped up, the landscape outside growing unfamiliar. The road twisted in impossible ways, lined with trees he didn't recognize, and the air smelled of rotting leaves. Jake's heart pounded as the driver finally spoke in a raspy whisper. "You wasn't supposed to get in." The car veered off the road and disappeared into the woods. Jake was never seen again, except sometimes on stormy nights, travelers swear they see a black sedan drifting down the highway with a pale-faced man staring at them through the window. Ethan met her at a quiet cafe on a rainy afternoon. She wore a red dress and had a kind of beauty that felt timeless. Her dark eyes sparkled, and her smile was soft but readable. They talked for hours as the storm raged outside. There was something hypnotic about the presence, and though Ethan barely knew her, he felt drawn in, like they had known each other forever. When the cafe announced it was closing, she leaned in and whispered, "Come with me. The night's just beginning." Ethan agreed without hesitation. They walked through the dim streets until they reached an old crumbling apartment building. Inside, everything smelled of mildew. The hallways narrowed and lined with flickering lights. She led him to her apartment, room 303. When the door opened, Ethan felt the air grow heavier, like stepping into another world. The room was eerily cold, and the furniture was covered in dust and plastic sheets, as if no one had lived there for years. "Sit," she said, her voice low and commanding. As Ethan sat, his phone buzzed. A text from his friend. "Hey, where are you? You okay?" Ethan started to reply, but she reached out and gently placed her hands over his. "You won't need that," she whispered. Her smile growing wider. Ethan noticed then her lips were too red and her teeth too sharp. Suddenly the door slammed shut behind them. Ethan jumped up, but the hallway beyond had vanished. The windows showed nothing but swirling blackness. He turned to face her, heart racing. Her eyes now glowed, and the shadows stretched unusually long across the walls. "No one ever leaves room 303, she whispered, her smile widening as the lights flickered out. And Ethan knew with chilling certainty that the night had truly just begun.